two of our NewsNation political analysts with me right now. Former President Trump's one-time acting chief of staff, Mick Mulvaney, is here, along with Johanna Maska, who served in the Obama administration. So we have two different perspectives here. Mick, let's start. Also in the former administration, two-time U.S. Attorney General William Barr speaking in a news interview. Let's watch.
If even half of it is true, then he's toast. I mean, it's a very detailed indictment, and it's very, very damning. And this idea of presenting Trump as a victim here, a victim of a witch hunt, is ridiculous. Yes, he's been a victim in the past. Yes, his adversaries have obsessively pursued him with phony claims, and I've been at his side defending against them when he is a victim. But this is much different.
We're going to talk a little bit about the victimization claims in a second, but I want to first ask you, Mick, do you think that the approval numbers that we've been seeing and reporting are off? Are a lot of Republicans kind of fed up with the drama and looking for another alternative right now?
They are. I think it's a big group of people you're talking about when you're talking about Republicans. They're going to be people who are going to rush the president's side. They're going to be people who automatically attack him, and then people who wait and see. I think Bill Barr is extraordinarily credible here, that when the former attorney general sits down and says, look, I know what indictment is, I know what the law is, this is a very damning sort of indictment, I think it causes a lot of Republicans to sort of sit back and pay attention. So, look, I think a lot of folks are going to wait and see. Keep in mind, the indictment is just the beginning. We don't know the details about the documents. We don't know the details about who the president talked to. So there's going to be a lot more information to come out between now and the end of this process.
Well, and I think that's part of the reason why we don't necessarily know why Mr. Barr and others are coming out saying what they're saying about how serious these charges are, if they don't have the details either.
Well, but what they've got is a very detailed indictment. Keep in mind, you don't have to be that detailed in a grand jury indictment. You just sort of have to say, you know, generally what the deal is. So when they come out and say, look, we've got examples of twice when he showed documents to people he should not have showed them to, when we have tape recordings, that's pretty detailed. So for a former attorney general to come out and say this is serious, people are going to be taking that seriously, and Trump's legal team should be as well.
Well, Mr. Trump has said he will continue to campaign even if he has to do some from prison. According to a recent poll, a majority of Americans, 57%, think President Trump or former President Trump should not serve a second term if he's convicted in this documents case. Nearly 2/3 of moderate voters agree with them. So I guess, I want to know, like, do you think that DeSantis has a chance? He really isn't as well known as Trump, but he's the only one out of all of the different Republicans that are actually throwing their hat in the ring who stands to clearly come out in front.
Yeah, Adrienne, I think it's too early to sort of focus on DeSantis. Keep in mind, a lot of the other candidates are just starting their campaign. It's a state-by-state race, so national polls don't really matter very much. You sort of need to look to Iowa and New Hampshire. But the answer is the same for all of them, which is they all are going to have a challenge to get any attention. All of the earned media, all of the free media coverage that politicians get is going to go to Donald Trump on this particular indictment. We're not talking this morning about Tim Scott's campaign. We're not talking this morning about Mike Pence's campaign. We're talking about Donald Trump. And that is going to continue for a long time. In fact, don't be surprised if the Trump team tries to drag this out as long as possible and to delay the trial as long as they possibly can because of all the free media attention they get from it. I know that sounds perverse, but that's American politics these days.
Well, there is a lot of perversity, and I know that some people have questioned this. I'm going to reference a 2022 article about 1 year ago from Business Insider, and there are a couple of portions I wanted to pull out. It says, with at least more hearings, this is on January 6th on the horizon, Democratic lawmakers, they're unsure what action they should take next to try to stop Trump. It goes on to say their options to lock him out of the Oval Office are unprecedented and fraught. Some warn the risk to democracy so imminent that extraordinary steps are needed now. And there's a quote from one of the members. I would love it if we could disqualify him, says Senate Judiciary Committee member Mazie Hirono from Hawaii, a Democrat. So I know that we are saying that these are very serious charges. There are questions about national security. If it is that serious, again, we don't know yet. Whether or not it is, does this make it seem like this is a personal vendetta against Trump rather than a verifiable investigation because of the long record of Democrats speaking out, Johanna, saying we have to stop Trump at any cost?
So as long as Republicans are going to stick with Trump's talking points and say that this is a witch hunt or this is, just another Democratic attempt to get him out of the office, certainly Republicans will believe this. The problem for Republicans right now, though, is this gymnastics that they're doing to defend former President Trump. And keep in mind, we just had this Discord leaker basically charged on similar charges, and he didn't give a foreign government actively or the press actively secrets. He just put it on Discord to his friends. President Trump very much similarly had these documents and showed them to friends. And so now you've got all these Republicans this weekend essentially saying, oh, because he didn't give them to foreign governments, then he shouldn't be charged. The various gymnastics that they're playing, it may be good for a Republican electorate, but it is not going to win a general election.
Thank you for watching. Go to newsnationnow.com to find NewsNation on your television provider. And don't forget to click the red subscribe button below to get more of NewsNation's fact-driven, unbiased coverage.